everybody, welcome back to the Philly Special Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Rudisil. This is the podcast for Eagles fans by an Eagles fan, and it's pretty obvious this is not the normal setup. We just had a desk built on the other side of the room here, so there's a lot of stuff going on in the middle. Couldn't get my equipment out, so it's a little bit unorthodox, but you could enjoy the other stuff on my wall other than the jerseys. Other than that, everything's the same, and the Eagles are still losing, so really everything is the same. Pretty tough outing against Las Vegas. It was a game that I felt like, if you listened last week, that we had a pretty good chance of coming out and showing out and being a little bit more aggressive and show that, this is a team that's maybe on the rise for a couple of wins in a row with the E2 part of the schedule coming up. It was probably, if not the worst game of the year, definitely the second worst game of the year. There was really nothing positive to take away other than kind of later in the game when the wheels started to turn, and this is a common thing that we've seen from the Eagles so far this entire year, especially on the offensive side, but it definitely happened on the defensive side as well, where the wheels just don't start to turn. They don't get in gear until it's too late. And in this case, usually it's a couple quarters in. In this case, it was the very end of the game. They finally decided to try to figure themselves out. I think the offensive game plan was better to start. They were running the ball. They used Miles Sanders a little bit more effectively, which is what they need to do. And then, of course, he gets hurt. So, you move to Gainwell, and they tried to run Gainwell a little bit, but they couldn't get off the ground. And really, I think a lot of that, the biggest weakness this week was offensive line play. Pass rush was very effective for Las Vegas. They stopped the run. A lot of the veteran guys too. I mean, we mostly were healthy on the line other than Brandon Brooks. I think was the only starter missing this week. I think Mailata came out for a little bit, or Johnson, one of the two. Doesn't matter. It still equaled not good in the end. So, yeah, it affected him pretty obviously, and we had Devontae Smith dropping a couple passes here and there, and the defense just couldn't stop anybody. I mean, when Derek Carr is incomplete for only 3 passes the entire game, that's an issue. That is a real issue for a defense, and it wasn't like he was squeezing in tough balls or anything like that. I mean, it was pretty straightforward. The guys were just wide open. They ran the ball effectively. Josh Jacobs had a good game. The only reason he didn't have a bigger game is because he got hurt and had to leave. And then Kenyon Drake proceeded to have a pretty decent game. So it was not good anywhere across the board for the Eagles in this one. It was really, really disappointing to see. And it was one that you kind of wish they would have at least been in it and had a little bit of an effort. But it wasn't the case. They got completely blown out. So that's all I really want to touch on in the game. I think the last thing I will say, though, there's a lot of Jalen Hurts hate. This is going to sound kind of reminiscent of last season with Carson Wentz for me, but a lot of Jalen Hurts hate after this game, and personally, I think this was one of his better games of the season. I think he did a better job of staying in the pocket. I think he did a better job of rolling out and keeping his eyes downfield. And if you look at his stats, give me 1 second here, I'll look it up, but it's one for the books that he's had so far this year, and especially coming off of such bad games, it would have been really easy for him to have just kind of quit and given up and noticed the downward spiral. But instead, 18 of 34, you wish he'd have a little bit of a better completion percentage, but it's over 50%, so that's not terrible. 236 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's not a terrible day, and especially when you look at the guys struggling to get over 200 yards passing over the last few weeks. It was a pretty good day overall. I would say he was one of the rare bright spots, and yet he's receiving some of the most criticism. Yeah, he didn't get the win, and that's definitely a big deal. You have to win games as a starting quarterback, but I think he played better, and if he keeps playing at that level, when you look at the schedule coming up here, we got Detroit, the Giants, and the Jets, and the Broncos for the next 6 weeks. In between there, we got the Chargers and we have the Saints. Those are going to be tough wins, obviously, especially if they play like they did against Las Vegas, but if Hurts keeps this level of play up, it's going to be tough for at least me to say that we need to go in a different direction. Now, that's just one game, because before that, besides week 1, he's been pretty lackluster, and part of the reason why we lost. I would not say that was the case this week. but they still lost, and it's tough, especially in Philadelphia, to keep a quarterback when you're losing, or a head coach. And this is particularly interesting this season because at the end of the year, depending on where everything plays out, but so far it's looking like, knock on wood, that Carson Wentz is going to play 75% of his games, and Miami is seemingly doing pretty terrible. The Eagles are doing pretty terrible. There's going to be some pretty high picks for Philadelphia this year, and 3 first-round picks at that. So the question we have to start asking ourselves is, or they need to start asking themselves, is who are we going to target? What do we need the most? Me personally, I would like to stay away from a quarterback if Jalen Hurts is the guy. But this is an audition year. Don't get it twisted. And you've already heard Nick Sirianni in some of his interviews recently talking about Gardner Minshew and how potentially we could see him at some point this year. So, yeah, definitely a chance that Jalen Hurts isn't going to be on the team next year. But we need to have a full audition, in my opinion. And especially if Sirianni, in his head, like this was the point to push it over, this game against Vegas, I don't get it. Because I think he played pretty well. Not great, but pretty well. And he definitely wasn't the low point of the team this week. He has been in weeks prior, and that's important to note, but I don't think a decision could be made on Hurts yet. Especially since we've only been through the hardest part. We've got the easier games coming up. If he's still struggling, if we're not beating the Jets or the Lions or anything, then yeah, we're obviously going to have to look at everything. As a matter of fact, it could be a complete hard reset. Another year where we end up tanking, trying to get the highest pick possible, and, maybe in some crazy world we have the first and second pick because Miami's so bad. It could be a legit hard reset, and you see Sirianni leave, you see Gannon leave, and it's starting from scratch with whatever talent we've still got around if we're not going to unload contracts at that point. I mean, there's so many different variants that can happen to the Eagles at the end of this year, and it all is going to depend on basically what I'm calling an audition year for the head coach, for the quarterback, for everybody, really. Yeah, because if it's going to be a hard reset, I mean, even the veterans, some of our top guys are probably going to get traded or released to free up cap room. I mean, that's kind of where they're at right now because they're wondering, right, do we just need a couple of pieces? Is that all we're missing to get ourselves into the playoffs and past the playoffs? Or are we never going to make it? Because you don't want to waste these picks. It's very rare that you get 3 first-round picks, and even rarer, the way it's playing out, you're going to have 2 picks in the top 10. So you don't want to mess it up. So we're going to add pieces to add to what we've already decided is a group that can make it with just a couple more pieces. That's what this year is for, to see how the offense is going to be under Hurts and how young they are, and the defense under Gannon, or is it a complete reset? And those are going to be the questions asked all year long. And I think hopefully it's going to be a little bit more complicated because right now it's like, yeah, let's just get rid of everybody, pick a new quarterback, new head coach if we need it. Let's just start from scratch. But that's with the hardest part of the schedule. So let's see how the easier part goes. There's still a lot of questions that are going to need answered, and I guarantee by the end of this season I will have answers for you, and they'll have answers for you, obviously. But yeah, let's look ahead here. Losing to the Lions would just be absolutely embarrassing. It'd be good if you're on the side of resetting because that's probably meaning we're going to pick before the Lions. But if you're like me and you are an optimist and you want to believe that we can win these easier games, because in my opinion there's still a shot at a sub 500 season and you want to be as good as possible, this should be a game that they should win. And it's just basically stopping a pretty struggling already offense for the Lions. I feel like based on the last 2 weeks after I said Leonard Fournette was going to pretty much be a non-factor, he's gone off. Josh Jacobs has gone off. I imagine DeAndre Swift is probably going to have a pretty big game. You have to contain that. You have to make Jared Goff make the plays down the field and hit some of these younger and less experienced receivers and make them win the game for him. The Khalif Raymonds, Amon-Ra St. Browns, those type, Hawkinson even, put the pressure on Goff. And if you alleviate that by letting the run game run wild and the little screen passes, then yeah, I think Detroit could definitely put up some good numbers against Philadelphia. Especially, it feels like a perfect storm because the Eagles have started slow so much. even though they scored on the first drive last week, but then they, gave up 30 straight points and were down 30-7. So what good was that? It's consistency, and that's what we need. And they need to start quick against Detroit. They need to just pound them early and keep them down, because Detroit is the kind of team that they'll start quick and then they'll kind of fall back. But at that point, it might be too late. It might be too late. So this feels like a game they could lose. I'm taking the Eagles still. I took them originally. I'm taking them now. But not an easy victory by any means. And definitely a prove-it game for a lot of these guys, to try to turn the tides and get Philadelphia back on their side, especially Carson Wentz Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. Sirianni and Gannon both, man, especially last week, they just looked like they didn't know what to do. It just looked like they come in with a game plan and stick with it to the end. And that's respectable, I guess. That's your plan. That's the way you want to do it, whether you get fired at the end or it doesn't work. At least you did it your way. But I think it's more admirable and better to be able to be flexible and figure out how you're going to change that game plan mid-game. When it's not working, when the tide is against you, what are you going to do differently? And I guess they tried. They kicked an onside kick to start the second half. I actually liked that decision. A lot of people didn't for obvious reasons. But, it's one of those things that if we recover it, okay, there's your momentum shift right there. Use that. I don't know if they would have, but you'd like to think they would. And, they didn't get it. And what's the point when the defense is giving up every single time they're giving up points? What's 20 more yards if it's going to end in 7 points anyway? So I like that he's trying to get into that. There were flashes, and he said it in his press conference, and I didn't really believe it until now I'm saying it out loud, that there are roots of growth, basically, that even though you can't really see it underneath, they are getting better. I think that was a phrase he just said because you have to say something. You don't just want to say, yeah, we suck, especially when you're a first-year head coach. But I don't know. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and hopefully we see something against Detroit. This is definitely a must-win game for anybody to hold on to hope for Philadelphia this year. And the rest after that is just cleaning up the mess and deciding what's good enough to keep, what can we salvage, and what needs to go in the trash, basically. So, yeah, that's last week. And this week coming up, it's in Detroit. I don't think that's going to be much of a factor going in. What else do we need to discuss here? I mean, I'm running out of patience with Jalen Hurts, as is a lot of people. I think it was a good game for him, as I said, but you'd like to just establish it. It sucks, too, when you're looking at, Ja'Marr Chase. This is kind of off topic, but Ja'Marr Chase is absolutely dominating. Seems like he's going to win Rookie of the Year. And DeVonta Smith still hasn't really gotten into a groove yet. He scored 1 touchdown, and that's it. He's getting a decent amount of yards, but you'd like to think that's your star receiver, right? I mean, this is a guy that's supposed to be carrying into the future. And nothing. There's just nothing there. So, and I'm not saying that's his fault. It might be Hurts' fault. It might be the system's fault. Regardless, the offense is failing when to me, it feels like it should be succeeding. And you would think as the weeks go on, we're heading into week 8, eventually that's going to get into rhythm, and it just hasn't. And, on the defensive side of the ball, it just seems like it's all or nothing. They're going to get a turnover or some crazy big yardage and sacks and stuff and be great. But then the very next drive, nobody's going to cover anybody, and they're going to give up a ton of points. It's just random. It's a roll of the dice every single time, 50-50 shot, whether they're going to be good or bad. And that's not good, for a team that I've been preaching all year. Consistency is the biggest key, and they have been anything but consistent. Definitely inconsistent, and that you never know. They might come out and beat the Lions by 50 points. They might win on a last-second field goal. I mean, that's literally where I'm at with this game. And I said last week when they played the Raiders, this game coming up, if the Raiders come out at their best, which clearly they did, that this could be a very, very one-sided match, and it was exactly that. I mean, Derek Carr played out of his mind. He's been great over the last few weeks, but he was really, really good against Philadelphia. And we very much could make Jared Goff look like a superstar as well. So, tough. It is tough. It is tough out here to be an Eagles fan right now, and the future looks bright with those picks, but at the same time, I think the rest of this year, as I said, is just trying to figure out what can be saved from anywhere and what needs to be saved. So I think that's all I got this week. Pretty short podcast. Like I said, we've got a lot going on here, so not to mention it was just a beatdown. I don't really want to talk about it. But Detroit, hopefully, it'll be a better scenario, be a better look, and we can have some positives and some things to grow on. But this has been the Philly Special Podcast. Get at us at the Philly Special PC on Twitter, on Facebook. We are on YouTube, the Philly Special Podcast. This is on Spotify as well. So thank you so much for listening. We'll get at you next week. And fly, Eagles, fly. Let's go beat the Lions.